Injustice often travels in silence, cloaked in routine and wrapped in politeness. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, that silence cracked when an elderly black veteran's first-class seat was quietly taken by a white passenger, and his protest politely dismissed. To most, it looked like a harmless mix-up, but for Walter Hawkins, it was a familiar pattern and a calculated move. One phone call to his daughter, a federal analyst, set off a chain of events the conspirators never saw coming. They thought he was just another old man with a cane. They never imagined the storm he was carrying inside it. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Walter "Hawk" Hawkins stood before his bedroom mirror, adjusting the crisp collar of his dress shirt with practiced precision. His weathered hands moved with deliberate care, smoothing out invisible wrinkles from his navy blue suit jacket. At 79, he still carried himself with military bearing, despite the slight stoop that age had pressed into his shoulders. The pre-dawn darkness pressed against his bedroom windows. On his bed lay an open briefcase, meticulously packed with documents, each folder aligned with perfect corners. Beside it rested his prized possession, a polished wooden cane with brass fittings, its surface worn smooth from years of use. His flip phone buzzed on the dresser. Hawk glanced at the caller ID and let out a measured breath. "Monica." "Dad." His daughter's voice carried that familiar mix of concern and frustration. "You don't have to do this, not like this. I can arrange secure transport." "Through your contacts?" Hawk interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. Drawing attention is exactly what they're expecting. Commercial flight, first class, nothing unusual. Just another old man visiting the capital. An old man carrying enough evidence to bring down half the Pentagon's brass, Monica shot back. "They'll be watching the airports." Hawk picked up his cane, feeling its reassuring weight. Inside its hollow core, encrypted data waited like a coiled snake, proof of a massacre in Panama, of orders that should never have been given, of bodies that should never have been buried in unmarked graves. Let them watch. They've been watching us for centuries. "Dad, your mother would have understood," Hawk said softly, knowing the words would sting. Sometimes the quietest path is the loudest statement. A long silence filled the line. "At least, let me monitor your flight remotely. I can track any unusual." "You do what you need to do," Hawk conceded, knowing his daughter would anyway. "But I'm taking this flight." After ending the call, Hawk methodically checked his travel documents. His first-class ticket to D.C. boarding pass, for seat 2B, military ID that had opened doors for white men, but had often failed to shield him from random searches. He tucked them into his breast pocket, patting it once. The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson was uneventful in the early morning hours. Hawk paid the parking fee, declined assistance with his bag, and made his way through the terminal with measured steps. His cane tapped a steady rhythm on the polished floor, each click a heartbeat of purpose. The security checkpoint loomed ahead, a maze of barriers and scanning equipment. Hawk noticed it immediately, the subtle shift in the TSA agent's posture as he approached, the way their eyes lingered a beat too long, the slight tightening of their expressions. "Sir, please step this way," a young agent called out, gesturing to a separate line even as white passengers continued flowing through the main queue. "Random security check." Hawk's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. "Of course. Random." He stepped where directed, watching as an elderly white couple was waved through without a second glance. "Arms out, sir," another agent instructed, running a wand over Hawk's suit. The device beeped near his hip. "What's in your pocket?" "Loose change," Hawk replied, already reaching for it. The coins clinked as he deposited them in the plastic bin. The first agent picked up Hawk's cane, turning it over in his hands. "This seems unusually heavy, sir. Modified in any way?" "It's a medical device," Hawk stated firmly, "and a reminder of service to this country." That cane flew over Hanoi. The agent's young face showed no recognition of the reference. "We'll need to examine it more closely. Please wait here." Hawk's fingers curled into a fist at his side, but his voice remained steady. "That cane is necessary for my mobility and was cleared by the VA. You'll find their documentation in my briefcase." A supervisor approached, drawn by the developing situation. More travelers were backing up in line now, some filming with their phones. Hawk could feel the weight of their stares, hear the murmured comments. "Is there a problem here?" the supervisor asked, eyes darting between Hawk and her staff. "No problem," Hawk replied, meeting her gaze. "Just another random check. Though I notice your definition of random seems rather specific." The supervisor had the grace to flush slightly. She examined Hawk's military ID, then his cane, before finally nodding to her staff. "He's cleared. Move along." Hawk collected his belongings with deliberate movements, refusing to show the tremor of anger in his hands. As he reassembled his dignity along with his possessions, he caught fragments of nearby conversations. Why do they always have to make such a fuss? If they'd just comply, it's for everyone's safety. He slipped his shoes back on, straightened his jacket, and gripped his cane. The evidence hidden within its core remained secure, unknown to those who had just handled it. Small victories, he thought, were still victories. The terminal stretched before him, gates numbered like coordinates on a map he'd been navigating his entire life. Hawk checked his watch, still plenty of time before boarding. He moved forward with purpose, his cane now tapping out a rhythm that sounded less like resignation and more like resolve. Hawk made his way through the bustling terminal, his cane marking time against the worn carpet. The gate area for his Washington, D.C. flight was already crowded with morning travelers when he arrived. He spotted an empty seat near the counter and settled in, placing his briefcase carefully beside him. "Now, boarding all passengers needing special assistance or extra time," the gate agent announced through the crackling speaker. Hawk gripped his cane and rose steadily to his feet. As a disabled veteran, he qualified for pre-boarding, a small courtesy that helped manage the strain on his aging joints. But as he approached the counter, a stream of well-dressed white passengers suddenly surged forward, forming a line that cut directly in front of him. The gate agent, a young woman with perfectly manicured nails and a plastic smile, began scanning their boarding passes without hesitation. "Excuse me," Hawk said, keeping his voice measured. "I believe pre-boarding was announced for those needing assistance." He gestured with his cane for emphasis. The gate agent barely glanced up from her computer. "Oh, yes, but we're having some system issues right now. Just give us a few minutes to sort this out." Hawk watched as she continued processing the line of passengers, none of whom showed any visible need for early boarding. A businessman in an expensive suit arrived after him, striding directly to the front. The gate agent welcomed him warmly. "Good morning, sir. Right this way." "Ma'am," Hawk tried again, his patience fraying at the edges. "I'm a disabled veteran with pre-boarding status." She looked up with an expression of practiced concern. "I understand, sir, but like I said, we're having technical difficulties. You'll just have to wait until we call your group." Her tone carried that familiar dismissive edge he'd heard countless times before. Hawk's jaw tightened, but he held his tongue. He'd learned long ago which battles to fight and which to endure. He stepped back, watching as more passengers filtered past him. When general boarding finally began, Hawk joined the line, his first-class ticket for Seat 2B held firmly in his hand. The same gate agent scanned his boarding pass without meeting his eyes, her earlier smile nowhere to be seen. The jet bridge stretched before him like a familiar adversary. Hawk took his time, his cane providing steady support as he made his way toward the aircraft. Flight attendants greeted passengers at the door, their welcomes becoming noticeably cooler as he stepped aboard. Hawk moved deliberately through first class, counting the rows. His seat, 2B, was on the left side of the aisle. But as he approached, he found a white man already settled there, casually dressed in khakis and a polo shirt. The man, who appeared to be in his late 30s, was typing on a laptop with an air of entitled comfort. "Excuse me," Hawk said, pulling out his boarding pass. "I believe you're in my seat, 2B." The man, Richard Slade, though Hawk didn't know his name yet, looked up with practiced surprise. "Oh? No, this is definitely my seat." He made no move to check his own ticket or shift from the position. "I have my boarding pass right here," Hawk said. Hawk held out his boarding pass, the paper crisp and official in his steady hand. "First class, seat 2B." Clear as day. Slade barely glanced at the ticket, his attention fixed on his laptop screen. "Listen, Pops, maybe you're getting a bit confused. You know how it is at your age? The numbers start swimming around." He chuckled, the sound dripping with condescension. "My eyes work just fine," Hawk replied, his voice carrying the weight of countless similar confrontations. "And they've seen enough to know exactly what's happening here." A white flight attendant approached, her heels clicking against the airplane's floor. Her name tag read Patricia, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Is there a problem here?" "This gentleman seems confused about his seat assignment," Slade said smoothly, still not looking up from his screen. "Maybe you could help him find where he's actually supposed to be." Patricia took the boarding pass from Hawk's hand without asking. She gave it a cursory glance, then shook her head. "You probably misread it, old man. Happens to the best of you." She echoed Slade's sentiment, handing the ticket back. Hawk's posture remained military straight, his dignity a shield against their casual cruelty. "What's written here don't lie," he said, each word measured and precise. "And I've fought for more important things than this chair." The cabin air grew thick with tension. Other passengers shifted in their seats, some pretending not to notice, others openly staring at the unfolding scene. A white woman in her 50s, seated across the aisle, suddenly spoke up. "Just let the gentleman sit," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through first class. "It's only a seat." Slade's face darkened. He finally closed his laptop, turning to face the woman. "Lady, I paid for this." "I'm not moving for anyone," he sneered, then added with deliberate malice, "especially someone who probably got it as a handout." The words hit Hawk like physical blows, but decades of control kept his expression neutral. His body tensed, combat-trained muscles remembering old reflexes. The cane in his hand, so much more than just a walking aid, pressed firmly into the carpet. "Watch your words," Hawk said, his voice like gravel against steel. "You're not just being rude, you're being disrespectful. And that, boy, is dangerous." The last word carried echoes of battles fought long ago, on fields far from this pressurized cabin. Patricia hurried back, this time with an air of authority. But instead of addressing Slade's behavior, she turned to Hawk. "Sir, we're trying to avoid a delay. Please cooperate." Her tone suggested she was doing him a favor by asking nicely. Hawk's hands began to tremble, not from age or fear, but from rage so deep and old it had roots in generations before him. He gripped his cane tighter, feeling the weight of its hidden contents, of all it represented. "You're asking me to surrender what's mine." "Again," he muttered, words heavy with history. Slade, emboldened by the flight attendant's support, leaned forward in his stolen seat. "What are you gonna do? Hit me with your stick?" His mouth twisted in a mocking smile. The taunt hung in the air for a moment. Then Hawk moved, faster than anyone expected from a man his age. He slammed his cane against the aisle floor, the sound cracking through the cabin like a rifle shot. Several passengers jumped. Even Slade flinched. "You think this stick just helps me walk?" Hawk's voice was low, but carried to every corner of the plane. His eyes, sharp with decades of witnessed injustice, locked onto Slade's. "It carried names. It buried friends. I won't stand for it being disrespected today." The cabin fell silent. Passengers held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Slade's smug expression faltered slightly, confronted with something he hadn't expected. Dignity that wouldn't bend, strength that wouldn't break. For a moment, it seemed like Hawk might finally unleash all those years of contained fury. But then, he drew in a deep breath, his military training asserting itself. This wasn't surrender, it was tactical retreat. He'd fought enough wars to know which battles served his ultimate mission. With deliberate slowness, Hawk turned away from Slade. He began walking down the narrow aisle, his cane marking each step with quiet authority. The passengers he passed couldn't meet his eyes, shame or indifference marking their faces in equal measure. A young black girl, no more than 14, held up her phone, recording everything. Her eyes met Hawk's as he passed, and in them he saw both anger and understanding. The next generation witnessing the same old story. Near the back of the plane, Hawk found his new seat, cramped and close to the bathroom. The indignity of it pressed against him like a physical weight, but his spine remained straight, his head held high. He settled into the middle seat, his knees pressed uncomfortable against the seat in front of him, while the truth hidden in his cane waited patiently above in the overhead bin. Hawk waited until the seatbelt sign turned off before reaching into his jacket pocket. His old flip phone, a deliberate choice, harder to track than smartphones, felt solid in his weathered hands. He glanced at the time. 7:42 a.m. Monica would be at her desk by now, surrounded by her wall of computer screens in her D.C. apartment. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Dad? I thought you were boarding." "We're on the plane," Hawk said quietly, keeping his voice low. His eyes tracked the movement in the aisle. Flight attendants, passengers settling in, a man in a suit walking too purposefully toward the front. They took the seat. The line went silent for 3 heartbeats. Those 4 words, their private code developed years ago, carried weight beyond their simple meaning. It wasn't about the seat. It was about patterns, surveillance, trap. "Tell me everything," Monica said, her voice shifting from daughter to operative. Hawk could hear her fingers already flying across her keyboard. "First class, 2B. Man named Slade. White, mid-30s, expensive watch, cheap manners." Hawk kept his tone casual, as if complaining about normal airline issues. Flight attendant backed his play without checking, almost like they were expecting it. More typing sounds from Monica's end. "Got the flight manifest. Pulling it up now." A pause. "Wait, something's wrong." Hawk watched as Patricia, the unhelpful flight attendant, passed by without making eye contact. "Wrong how?" "The passenger list. It's been modified. Recently." Monica's voice took on the focused edge she got when diving deep into code. "There are digital timestamps, multiple edits made within the last hour. That's not normal. Airlines lock their manifests 12 hours before takeoff." Hawk shifted in his cramped seat, his knee protesting. "How many changes?" 3 new passengers added. "But here's the thing. Their IDs don't exist in any normal database. I'm running them through everything. DMV, Social Security, even international records." More rapid typing. "These are ghost passengers, Dad. Professional-grade covers." The young girl who had recorded earlier was still watching him, her phone now hidden but clearly ready to start filming again if needed. Hawk gave her a slight nod, an acknowledgement of their shared understanding. "Location of these ghosts?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. 2 are scattered through first class. The third, Monica trailed off. Hawk could picture her leaning closer to her screens, that familiar crease forming between her eyebrows. The third is listed as Federal Air Marshal. Name's Peter Keene. Hawk's hand tightened on his cane. You know that name? No, but his credentials are wrong. I'm accessing the TSA registry now. Had to bounce through 3 proxy servers to get in. Monica's typing grew more intense. Dad, his Marshal ID number doesn't match their system. It's formatted correctly, but it's not real. Whoever he is, he's not TSA. A flight attendant, not Patricia, but a younger black woman with kind eyes, paused near Hawk's row. Can I get you anything to drink, sir? Water, please, Hawk said, then returned to his call once she moved on. How deep does this go? Deep enough that someone's actively monitoring the manifest. I can see their digital fingerprints all over it. Military-grade encryption, Dad. The kind they used in Panama, Hawk finished. The memory of that night, the jungle heat, the screams, the orders that no one was supposed to question, pressed against his mind. Exactly. More typing, then a sharp intake of breath. Oh, God. Dad, these aren't random agents. The technical signatures match a private security firm. The same one that cleaned up after Panama, Hawk said, his voice barely a whisper now. The same ones who made our witnesses disappear. The plane had finished boarding. Through the small window, Hawk could see ground crew disconnecting fuel lines. Soon they'd be in the air, trapped in a metal tube with at least 3 trained operatives. Dad, listen to me. Monica's voice carried the same intensity it had that night 15 years ago, when she'd first learned what really happened to her mother. Don't trust anyone on that plane. These people, they're not there to arrest you. They're there to make sure you never reach DC. Hawk watched as the kind-eyed flight attendant returned with his water. She placed it carefully on his tray table, then slipped him an extra package of peanuts with a sympathetic smile. Something about her felt different from the others. A fellow soldier recognizing another, perhaps. I hear you, he said into the phone, calculating angles and options. How long can you stay on their systems? I've got multiple entry points established. They know someone's in there, but they can't trace it back to me. I can see everything they do in real time. Monica paused. Dad, what's in that cane that's worth all this? Hawk glanced at the overhead bin where his cane rested. Inside its hollow core, a small flash drive contained enough evidence to bring down 3 generals, 2 defense contractors, and an entire shadow operation. Proof of not just what happened in Panama, but why, and who gave the orders. Truth, he answered simply. And they know I'm finally ready to tell it. The hearing's tomorrow morning, Monica said. They can't risk you testifying. Her voice softened. Maybe we should have done this differently. Found another way. No more hiding, Hawk said firmly. No more waiting for the right time. You know what your mother always said. Justice doesn't have a timeline. Monica finished. I remember. She took a deep breath. Okay. I'm going to keep monitoring their communications. Any movement, any changes, I'll find a way to warn you. The plane began to push back from the gate. Flight attendants started their safety demonstration, including Patricia up front, who still wouldn't look toward the back of the plane. Dad? Monica's voice carried decades of unspoken worry. Be careful. Always am, Hawk replied, then added softly, Love you, baby girl. He closed the phone just as the captain announced their final descent preparations. The young girl with the phone was still watching him, her eyes wise beyond their years. Hawk settled back in his seat, mind already mapping out the chess game ahead. The plane's engines rumbled as they taxied toward the runway. Hawk kept his movements minimal, just his eyes moving, scanning methodically like he'd done thousands of times in combat zones. First class was visible through the gap between curtains. A perfect surveillance position. A man in a crisp suit, Too crisp for a 6 a.m. flight, shifted in his aisle seat. Agent Keene, most likely. His posture was military rigid, despite trying to appear casual. He kept his right arm close to his side, where a shoulder holster would sit. 2 rows behind Keene, another passenger caught Hawk's attention. The woman wore business attire, but her shoes were wrong. Tactical boots poorly disguised as heels. She pretended to read a magazine while maintaining clear sightlines to both exits. The 2 agents exchanged a look that lasted less than a second, the kind of silent communication Hawk recognized from his own special ops days. They were coordinating, establishing positions. The 3rd ghost passenger was somewhere behind him, boxing him in. "Sir?" The kind-eyed flight attendant from earlier appeared beside his seat. Her name tag read Emma Brooks. "I noticed you didn't get any coffee earlier. Would you like some now?" Hawk studied her face. There was something in her stance, the way she planted her feet slightly apart, ready for movement. Her hands were positioned just so, like someone used to keeping them free for quick action. He took a chance. "Rather have some of that army coffee. Strong enough to float a horseshoe." Emma's eyes widened slightly. It was an old military phrase, one that hadn't been common since Vietnam. Her response was automatic. Better than marine coffee, thick enough to use as axle grease. The counterphrase was perfect. Hawk felt his shoulders relax a fraction. Here was someone who understood the language of service, of duty. Someone who might recognize the larger game being played. "You served?" he asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. 68W. "Combat medic," Emma replied, adjusting her serving cart to block the aisle view from first class. 3 tours in Afghanistan. You? Special Forces. Panama, among others. Hawk kept his voice low. Some operations that officially never happened. Emma nodded, her professional smile never wavering, though her eyes grew sharp. "I noticed the cane. Seems like it's seen as much action as you have." "More than some would like," Hawk said meaningfully. He glanced toward first class. "They took my seat. Put me back here for a reason." Emma's movements remained smooth and casual as she prepared his coffee, but her attention was fully focused. "I saw what happened. That man, Slade, his boarding pass was wrong. I checked the manifest earlier, but someone had changed it. Above my clearance to question. Changes made within the last hour," Hawk confirmed, along with 3 new passengers. "Ghosts." Emma's hand stilled for just a moment. "The air marshal? I've never seen one board so late, or move like that. Not a real marshal. None of them are what they claim." Hawk accepted the coffee she offered, using the movement to scan the cabin again. "I'm being hunted. There are 3 on this plane. They took my seat so I'd be alone." Emma's professional mask cracked slightly, revealing steel underneath. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You're not alone anymore." She straightened up, resuming her flight attendant persona, but her eyes held understanding. She'd seen enough in Afghanistan to recognize when something wasn't right. "I'll be doing regular cabin checks, every 15 minutes." Hawk gave a slight nod. "Watch the one in 12A, and the woman in the blue blazer, 4C. They're coordinating." "I see them," Emma confirmed, adjusting her serving cart. "The 3rd? Behind me somewhere, keeping me surrounded." Hawk sipped his coffee. "They're waiting for the right moment. Probably over water, where they can claim it was natural causes. Heart attack, maybe. Old man flying alone." Emma's jaw tightened. "Not on my watch." She glanced at her watch, establishing their timeline. "I'm lead attendant on this flight. Patricia up front reports to me, even if she doesn't like it. I can control cabin access, meal service timing." The plane turned onto the runway, engines powering up. Hawk felt the familiar pre-mission tension settling into his bones. "They'll move before we land. Can't risk me reaching DC." "Then we've got 4 hours," Emma said. her voice carrying the calm efficiency of someone used to working under pressure. "I'll find the third one. These aisles are my territory. I know every corner, every blind spot." The acceleration pushed them back in their seats as the plane began takeoff. Through the gap in the curtains, Hawk saw Keen watching their interaction, his face too carefully neutral. "Be careful," Hawk warned. "These aren't ordinary agents. They've had decades of practice making problems disappear." Emma gave him a look that carried the weight of her own combat experience. "So have I. Different battlefield, same principles." She adjusted her uniform with military precision. "They expect you to be helpless back here. Let's use that." The plane lifted off, leaving Atlanta behind. Hawk watched the ground fall away, thinking of all the missions that had started just like this. Tension building, plans forming, allies emerging from unexpected places. But this time, the stakes were higher than any operation he'd ever run. This wasn't just about survival. It was about finally breaking decades of silence, about bringing dark things into the light, about making sure the truth in his cane reached the right hands, no matter the cost. Emma moved her cart forward, every step calculated. She had the look of someone who'd found their mission again, the sense of purpose that many veterans lost after leaving service. As she passed the first-class curtain, she caught Hawk's eye one more time. In that glance was a promise. Soldier to soldier. She would watch his six, just as others had done in jungles and deserts across the world. The hunt was on, but this time, the hunters didn't realize their prey had backup. The plane had reached cruising altitude when Captain Danvers's voice crackled over the intercom. Too smooth, too rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to severe weather systems over DC, we'll be adjusting our flight path. Nothing to be concerned about. Just standard procedure." Hawk's eyes narrowed. The sky outside his window was crystal clear, scattered with morning sunlight. He pressed the screen on the seat back in front of him, pulling up the flight path display. The blue line showing their route had shifted, no longer pointing toward Reagan National. Instead, it curved west, toward the Virginia mountains. Emma appeared beside him, pretending to check seatbelts. "That's not right," she whispered. "Weather diversions go to Baltimore or Philadelphia. Not..." She squinted at the new destination code. "I don't even recognize that airstrip." "Because it's not commercial," Hawk muttered. He pulled out his flip phone, keeping it low against his leg. His arthritic fingers moved slowly over the keypad, typing a coded message to Monica. The response came quickly. "Tracking flight path now, don't move." Hawk watched the screen, remembering similar mountain strips in Panama. Isolated places where things could happen without witnesses. The kind of locations where helicopters could land and people could disappear. The girl who'd filmed the earlier confrontation was still recording occasionally, her phone aimed discreetly between the seats. She couldn't know it, but she was now their best witness. Every frame she captured was evidence. His phone vibrated again. Monica's message was urgent. "Flight manually redirected 6 mins ago. Private Fed clearance code. Weather system clear over DC. Confirmed with 3 sources. Downloading girl's live stream now." Hawk's jaw tightened. The captain was in on it. The whole flight had been a trap from the start. The seat theft, the isolation, and now this detour. They needed him away from crowds, away from cameras and questions. Emma returned with fresh coffee, her movements casual, but her eyes alert. 3 passengers just requested special meals they didn't order at booking, all in exit rows. She adjusted her collar, a gesture Hawk recognized as military sign language. Positions changed, threats moving. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as they passed through a cloud bank. In the temporary shadows, Hawk saw Keen rise from his seat, straightening his jacket. The agent moved toward the lavatory near first class, passing close to Slade's seat. Their words carried just enough for Hawk's trained ears to catch. Keen's voice was cold, professional. "Once he collapses, we'll call it a stroke. No questions." Slade's response was quieter, almost nervous. "Make it clean. My father wants no connections." Hawk's hand tightened around his cane, feeling the weight of the evidence inside. The same kind of men who'd ordered massacres in Panama were now trying to bury the truth again. Same playbook, different decade. The young girl with the phone was still recording, her camera now capturing Keen's return to his seat. She couldn't know she was documenting a murder plot in progress, but every second of footage was another thread they couldn't easily erase. Emma passed by again, this time with a trash bag. "2 more hours to their destination," she whispered. "They've requested early meal service. Probably want witnesses focused on their trays." Hawk nodded imperceptibly. He'd seen this choreography before. The careful timing, the creation of distractions, the way they'd make it all look natural. His death would be just another statistic. Elderly black man dies on flight. Nothing to see here. His phone buzzed one last time. Monica had attached a video clip, the girl's live stream from earlier, already spreading across social media. The comments were flooding in, people asking questions about the stolen seat, about the way he'd been treated. They'd wanted him invisible, but their own actions had made him visible. Every person who shared that video was now a potential witness. Every comment was a thread they couldn't easily cut. Through the gap between seats, Hawk could see Slade shifting uncomfortably, checking his phone. The businessman's facade was cracking. He hadn't planned on an audience. He'd expected a simple cleanup job, not a viral moment. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, announcing meal service would begin early due to the route change. The timing was too perfect, too coordinated. They were starting their endgame. Hawk felt the familiar combat clarity settling in, the way time seemed to slow down before an operation. His fingers traced the carved grooves in his cane, each one representing a fallen brother who'd trusted him to tell their story. He wouldn't let them down. Not here. Not today. Emma moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, but her movements created a pattern, always keeping herself between Hawk and at least one of the agents. She was building a defensive perimeter in plain sight, using drink carts and passenger needs as cover. The girl with the phone had switched to sending texts, her fingers flying across the screen. More witnesses, more eyes. The very technology they'd planned to use against him, the edited manifests, the cleared flight paths, was now being turned back on them. Keen and Slade exchanged another look as the meal carts started rolling out. They thought they had time, thought they had control. They didn't realize that while they'd been watching Hawk, others had been watching them. Hawk's cane rested against his leg, ready. Inside it, encrypted files waited like a time bomb, evidence that would expose decades of covered-up crimes. All he had to do was survive long enough to deliver it. The plane banked slightly, following its new course toward the Virginia mountains. Somewhere below, empty roads wound through forests, perfect places for accidents, for disappearances. But first, they had to get him off this plane. And Hawk had no intention of making that easy. The beverage cart rattled as Emma pushed it down the narrow aisle, her practiced smile masking the tension in her shoulders. She'd positioned it perfectly, a rolling barrier between Hawk and the watchful eyes of Agent Keen. "Coffee, sir?" she asked loudly, deliberately spilling a few drops on the fold-down tray of a passenger seated next to Hawk. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me get that cleaned up right away." The commotion drew attention as she fussed with napkins and apologies. In the controlled chaos, Hawk's weathered hands moved with deliberate precision across his cane. His fingers found the worn grooves near the bottom, marks that looked like age and used to untrained eyes, but were actually carefully disguised release points. The cabin lights had been dimmed for the early dinner service, creating shadows that worked in their favor. Most passengers had their reading lights focused on their meals or entertainment screens, creating pools of isolated light that left the spaces between seats in comfortable darkness. Hawk's arthritic fingers moved slowly but surely, working the concealed mechanism. Emma kept up her performance, asking nearby passengers about meal preferences and drink orders, her body angled to block any direct line of sight to the veteran. "Would anyone like more ice?" she called out, the ice cubes clinking loudly in her pitcher. The sound covered the faint click as the bottom section of Hawk's cane finally loosened. A baby started crying 3 rows ahead, pulling more attention forward. Hawk used the moment to slide the metal cap free, revealing a hollow space within the cane's shaft. Nestled inside was a sleek digital drive, barely larger than his thumb, wrapped in protective fabric that had dampened any rattling. "Sir, would you like cream with that coffee?" Emma's voice carried just enough to mask the sound of Hawk retrieving the drive. Her eyes darted to the front of the cabin where Slade was watching a movie, headphones firmly in place. The drive felt warm in Hawk's palm, heavy with the weight of truth rather than mass. He slipped it into his jacket pocket as Emma cleaned up the last of the spilled coffee, her movements creating a natural screen between him and the aisle. "Thank you, young lady," Hawk said clearly, playing his part. "You've been most helpful." The next hour passed with agonizing slowness. The cabin settled into that peculiar twilight state of long flights, a liminal space where time seemed to stretch and blur. Perfect cover for what needed to be done. Passengers dozed in their reclined seats, faces illuminated by the blue glow of their screens. Movies played silently behind headphones. The constant drone of the engines created white noise that swallowed smaller sounds. Emma made regular passes, checking on passengers, always finding reasons to pause near Hawk's row. She'd note his empty cup, adjust his blanket, ask if he needed anything, each interaction allowing her to scan the cabin and track their observers. Hawk kept his movements minimal, using decades of training to operate in plain sight. His flip phone lay open in his lap, partially covered by the airline blanket. The digital drive connected to it through a port that looked outdated to modern eyes. Exactly why he'd chosen it. Sometimes the old ways were the safest ways. The first file transfer began, painfully slow by modern standards. But speed wasn't the priority. Security was. Each packet of data was heavily encrypted, broken into segments that would be meaningless if intercepted individually. A child walked past, heading to the bathroom, stepping on creaky floor panels. Hawk used the footsteps to cover the sound of buttons being pressed. Emma intercepted the child's return journey, asking if they'd like a snack, creating another moment of distraction. The phone's screen flickered with progress bars, each one representing another piece of evidence being prepared for transmission. Photos from Panama, documents with signatures that powerful men had thought were safely buried, audio files that could shatter careers and expose decades of lies. Keene rose from his seat, stretching casually. Emma immediately began collecting trash from the rows between him and Hawk, her cart once again becoming a barrier. The agent paused, then changed direction, heading toward the forward lavatory instead. More files transferred, more progress bars filled. Hawk's face remained impassive, looking for all the world like another elderly passenger fighting sleep. But his eyes never fully closed, watching reflections in windows, monitoring movements in the cabin. Finally, the first complete file set was ready. Hawk's fingers moved carefully across the keypad, entering the secure connection codes Monica had established. Years of classified operations had taught him that the most dangerous moment was always at the point of transmission. The send command activated. Hawk felt, rather than heard, the slight vibration as the data began its journey. bouncing through layers of encryption and ghost servers Monica had prepared. A journey that would end with truth breaking free. Emma passed by again, this time with fresh pillows. Her eyes asked the question she couldn't voice. Hawk gave an almost imperceptible nod. The first package was away. His phone buzzed once. Monica's confirmation of receipt. Hawk's fingers typed out his message, each word carrying the weight of decades. This is part 1. If I don't make it, burn the rest down. The remaining files waited in the drive, ready for their turn. But timing would be crucial. Send too many at once, and they'd detect the data burst. Space them too far apart, and they might not all make it before whatever they had planned. Emma watched Hawk tuck the phone away, her face professionally neutral, but her eyes carrying understanding. They both knew what burn it down meant. Not destruction, revelation. The kind of fire that illuminated truth and burned away lies. The cabin lights dimmed further as the sun outside began to set, casting long shadows through the windows. Somewhere in the darkness ahead lay their diverted destination. But now, a different countdown had begun, one measured in uploaded files rather than miles. Agent Keen moved through the dim cabin like a shadow, his practiced stride carrying him directly to Hawk's row. He stopped, blocking the aisle completely, one hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. "Mr. Hawkins," Keen said, voice pitched low but carrying authority, "I need you to come with me to the front of the aircraft. You're under federal suspicion of cyber-terrorism." Hawk didn't look up immediately. His weathered hands remained folded in his lap, but tension radiated from his seated form. Several passengers stirred, sensing the confrontation building. "Cyber-terrorism?" Hawk's laugh was dry as desert sand. "That's what you're calling the truth these days?" Keen leaned closer, dropping his voice further. "Sir, don't make this difficult. We can handle this quietly, or like you handled Panama quietly." Hawk's eyes finally met Keen's, and there was steel in them. How many bodies did that take? Color drained from Keen's face. His professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. "That's classified information. You're classified to hide your crimes." Hawk cut in, his voice rising. "You wear that badge like it makes you righteous. But you're nothing but a traitor in uniform." The words hit Keen like physical blows. His jaw clenched. "Last warning, old man. Stand up now, or I'll—" Hawk's hand tightened on his cane. "You'll what? Kill me like you killed those villagers? Like you killed my men?" Something snapped in Keen's eyes. He lunged forward, reaching for Hawk's collar. But the veteran was ready. In one fluid motion that belied his age, Hawk's hand dropped to his boot and came up with something small and metallic. Keen's fingers were inches from Hawk's throat when the stun pin made contact with his wrist. A sharp crack of electricity filled the air. Keen jerked backward, his arm temporarily useless, crashing into the opposite row of seats. Passengers screamed. A child started crying. The second agent, who had been seated near the wing, was already moving down the aisle. Hawk pushed himself up, using his cane for leverage. His joints protested, but decades of combat training took over. He shifted his weight, getting his center of gravity low and stable. Keen recovered quickly, professional training overriding the pain. He charged forward, trying to use his younger body and superior strength to overwhelm the older man in the confined space. But Hawk had fought in tighter spots than this. He deflected Keen's rush with his cane, sending the agent crashing into an armrest. Phones appeared everywhere, passengers recording the confrontation. "He's attacking an elderly man," someone shouted. "That's a federal agent," another voice countered. The second agent reached them, adding to the chaos. He tried to grab Hawk from behind, but Emma appeared like an avenging angel. She swung her heavy service cart with precise aim, catching the agent in the side of his knee. The man went down with a howl of pain. Keene used the distraction to land a solid punch to Hawk's ribs. The old veteran grunted, but didn't fall. Instead, he hooked his cane around Keene's ankle and pulled, sending them both into the aisle. They grappled on the floor, Keene's youth against Hawk's experience. The agent tried to pin Hawk's arms, but the veteran had survived worse holds in worse places. He twisted, using pressure points that hadn't changed since his combat days. "Stay down," Keene growled through clenched teeth. "Over my dead body," Hawk spat back. More passengers were standing now, filming the fight. The cabin filled with shouts and accusations. Emma positioned herself to block the second agent from rejoining the fight, her cart becoming a barrier. Keene managed to get on top, trying to force Hawk's hands behind his back. But the veteran had one more surprise. He drove his elbow up, catching Keene in the throat. The agent's grip loosened just enough. Hawk rolled, reversing their positions. His knee found Keene's solar plexus, driving the air from the younger man's lungs. The agent's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't expected this level of resistance from a man nearly twice his age. "We're not going down without a fight," Hawk growled, his face inches from Keene's. "Not this time." The words carried through the cabin, picked up by dozens of recording phones. They hung in the air like a promise or a threat as the two men locked eyes, neither willing to back down. Blood trickled from a cut on Hawk's lip. His breath came in hard gasps, but his hands remained steady, pinning Keene to the floor. The agent struggled, but Hawk's weight and position gave him the advantage. Emma kept her cart firmly in place, watching the second agent who was still nursing his injured knee. Other flight attendants hovered uncertainly at both ends of the cabin, unsure whose authority to recognize. Passengers in nearby rows had retreated as far as they could, pressing against windows and each other. But their phones stayed steady, capturing every moment of the confrontation. The truth was being recorded from every angle, impossible to deny or cover up. Slade's voice carried from first class. "Those are federal agents. Someone stop this!" But nobody moved to help. The sight of two armed men attacking an elderly veteran had shifted sympathies. Even those who had ignored the earlier seat theft were now watching with open concern and growing anger. Keene's face was turning red from exertion and rage. He bucked and twisted, trying to break Hawk's hold. But the veteran had learned patience in the jungles of Vietnam and the streets of Panama. He held firm, using knowledge of leverage and pressure points to maintain control. With Keene and the second agent temporarily subdued, Emma moved swiftly through the cabin, her flight attendant's keycard giving her access to critical systems. She reached the communications panel near the cockpit and began working quickly, her military training evident in her efficient movements. "I need 2 minutes," she called softly to Hawk, who maintained his hold on Keene. Her fingers flew over the control panel, rerouting the cockpit's communication system. Years of airline procedures had taught her every override code, every backup system. She plugged a small adapter into Hawk's flip phone, connecting it to the plane's entertainment system. "Monica?" Hawk's voice was steady despite his recent exertion. "It's time." Through the phone's speaker, Monica's voice crackled with determination. "Uploading now, Dad. Every screen, every channel." The cabin's overhead screens flickered to life. Passengers who had been filming the fight now turned their attention upward as Hawk's face appeared on every display. But this was a different Hawk, younger by perhaps a decade, sitting in what looked like a home office, his military decorations visible on the wall behind him. "My name is Walter Hawkins," the recorded voice began, strong and clear. "I served in Special Forces for 30 years. What I'm about to share has been buried by 3 administrations." Keene renewed his struggles, but Hawk's grip remained firm. "You can't stop this anymore," he told the agent quietly. The video continued, showing military documents, satellite images, and photographs. Hawk's voice narrated each piece of evidence with precise detail. December 18, 1989, Panama City outskirts. Operation Just Cause. What you're looking at isn't just collateral damage. It's systematic elimination of civilian witnesses. Gasps filled the cabin as graphic images appeared. Bodies in mass graves, villages reduced to ash. Documents showed signatures, orders, dates, all pointing to deliberate targeting of civilian populations. These weren't mistakes, Video Hawk continued. These were orders. Orders that came from men who still hold power today. A passenger near the front vomited into a bag. Others couldn't look away from the screens, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. Emma stood guard by the communication panel, her own face grim with recognition. She'd seen similar atrocities in her own service time. The testimony moved forward in time. Iraq, 2003. The pattern repeated. Different desert, same lies. More documents appeared, showing falsified reports, doctored casualty numbers, evidence of systematic cover-ups. They're watching this live at the Pentagon. Monica's voice came through Hawk's phone. "I've broken through their firewalls. They can't shut it down." Slade's voice carried from first class, tight with panic. "This is classified information. Everyone watching this is complicit in..." "Enough!" Multiple passengers shouted him down. The video showed more recent footage, military contractors gunning down unarmed civilians, with dates and locations carefully documented. Hawk's voice provided context for each incident, naming the officers who gave the orders and those who covered them up. "I carried these secrets for decades," Video Hawk said. "Watched good men die to keep them buried. But truth doesn't die. It waits." A young mother in the middle rows was crying openly now. "Those were children," she whispered, clutching her own child closer. "All feeds are live," Monica reported. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they're all picking it up. Social media is exploding. "Dad, you did it. They can't bury this anymore." The plane's intercom crackled. "This is your captain. We've been ordered to make an immediate landing at Andrews Air Force Base. All passengers, please remain seated and..." The captain's voice cut off as Slade burst from first class, a compact pistol gripped in his shaking hand. His face was contorted with rage and fear. "Turn it off!" he screamed, waving the weapon wildly. "Turn it all off now!" Passengers screamed and ducked behind seats. Emma positioned herself between Slade and the communication panel, her body tense but ready. Hawk maintained his hold on Keene, but turned his head to face Slade. "Your father's name is in these files, isn't it?" Hawk's voice carried clearly despite the chaos. "That's why you're really here. Not just to stop me, but to protect his legacy." Slade's hand trembled violently. "You don't understand what you're doing. These secrets protect people. They protect criminals," Hawk countered. "Men who ordered deaths from comfortable offices. Men who got rich while good soldiers died keeping their secrets." The video continued playing overhead, relentless in its revelation of decades of covered-up atrocities. Every passenger's phone was out now, recording Slade's breakdown, streaming it alongside Hawk's testimony. "Monica," Hawk spoke into his phone, never taking his eyes off Slade's weapon. "How many are watching?" "Millions, Dad. It's trending globally." The Pentagon's internal communications are in chaos. They're scrambling response teams, but it's too late. Everyone's seeing everything. Slade's gun swung between targets. Emma, Hawk, the overhead screens, his composure cracking with each passing second. The weapon shook so badly now he could barely aim. "My father was a hero," he shouted, but his voice broke on the last word. "Your father was a murderer," Hawk replied calmly. "Just like the men he served." just like the men he protected. And now, everyone knows. The plane began its descent toward Andrews, but the damage was done. Decades of carefully hidden crimes were playing on every screen, being shared across every platform. The truth had broken free, and no amount of government damage control could contain it now. Slade's finger tightened on the trigger, his face a mask of desperate fury. The passengers held their breath, caught between the video's horrifying revelations and the immediate threat before them. The tension in the cabin crystallized as Slade's gun wavered between targets. His eyes, wild with desperation, finally settled on Hawk. Emma, moving with the instincts honed from both military and airline service, smoothly positioned herself in front of a young boy who had been caught in the aisle during the chaos. "Everyone stay down," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed in crisis situations. Hawk stood perfectly still, his weathered face showing no fear despite the weapon aimed at his chest. His years of combat experience had taught him that fear was a luxury he couldn't afford in moments like these. He could read the tremor in Slade's trigger finger, the sweat beading on his forehead, the slight shuffle of his feet, all signs of a man about to break. "Go ahead," Hawk's voice carried through the cabin, deep and steady as a drumbeat. "But you die first." The words weren't a threat. They were a promise, delivered with the certainty of a man who had faced death many times before. Overhead, the screens continued their relentless display of evidence. Documents flashed past showing signatures, dates, and death counts. The truth that had been buried for so long was now impossible to ignore, filling every inch of the cabin with its terrible weight. "You don't understand," Slade's voice cracked, the gun shaking more violently now. "These secrets, they're bigger than you. Bigger than any of us." Passengers huddled in their seats, phones still recording, capturing every moment of the confrontation. The young mother who had been crying earlier pressed her child's face into her shoulder, shielding them from the scene unfolding in the aisle. Hawk's eyes never left Slade's face, but his grip on his cane shifted subtly. Years of training had taught him to recognize the perfect moment, when an opponent's resolve wavered just enough to create an opening. He could see that moment approaching in Slade's increasingly unstable stance. "Those secrets killed my friends," Hawk said, his voice growing harder. "They buried truth under lies, honor under shame. They made murderers look like heroes." Slade's face contorted at the word heroes. "Shut up," he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "You don't know anything about heroes." The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, causing several passengers to gasp. Slade's attention flickered for just a split second, and Hawk moved. In one fluid motion that belied his age, Hawk swung his cane up and hurled it with precision at Slade's gun arm. The weapon discharged with a deafening crack that echoed through the cabin. White-hot pain blazed across Hawk's side as the bullet grazed him, but his momentum carried through. The cane struck Slade's wrist with devastating force. There was a sharp crack. Bone or wood, no one could tell. And the gun went flying. Slade howled in pain, but before he could recover, Hawk was on him. They crashed to the floor together, Hawk's decades of combat experience compensating for his age. His hands found Slade's throat, pinning him down with a strength born of righteous fury. Blood seeped from Hawk's wound, but he didn't seem to notice. "Who sent you?" Hawk's voice thundered through the cabin, drowning out the gasps and cries of shocked passengers. "Who?" Slade struggled beneath him, face reddening, eyes wide with a mix of fear and something else, something like shame. "My father," he gasped out, the words barely audible. "Panama. We had orders." The words hit Hawk like physical blows. His grip loosened slightly as recognition dawned in his eyes. Through the phone still connected to the plane's systems, Monica's voice came soft. and horrified. "Oh my God! It's his son!" Emma moved quickly to secure the dropped weapon, keeping her eyes on both men. The young boy she had protected peeked out from behind her, watching the scene with wide, uncomprehending eyes. Blood continued to seep through Hawk's shirt, where the bullet had grazed him, creating a dark stain that spread slowly across his side. The pain was there, but distant, overwhelmed by the roaring in his ears as pieces of a decades-old puzzle suddenly clicked into place. "Colonel Slade," Hawk said, his voice hollow with recognition. "December 18th, 1989. He gave the order to burn the village, to silence the witnesses." Slade had stopped struggling, his body going limp beneath Hawk's grip. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. "He said it was necessary," he whispered. "Said it was for the greater good." The overhead screens still played their damning evidence, now showing footage of that very village, before and after. The destruction was total, methodical, deliberate. Not a single survivor left to tell the tale. Through the phone, Monica's typing could be heard, fast and furious. "Dad, I'm finding more. Colonel Slade's signature is on dozens of similar orders. Not just Panama, Colombia, Iraq, Afghanistan." The plane continued its descent toward Andrews, the cabin filled with a terrible silence, broken only by the continuing testimony on the screens and Slade's ragged breathing. Hawk's blood dripped slowly onto Slade's expensive shirt, creating a dark constellation of spots. Emma moved closer, first aid kit in hand. "Sir, you're bleeding. Let me help." But Hawk remained focused on Slade, his face a mask of contained fury and old pain. "Your father killed my men," he said, each word precise and heavy. "Good men, honorable men. And you're just like him, hiding truth behind violence, burying justice under threats." Slade's eyes closed, tears still leaking from beneath the lids. His next words came out broken, almost childlike. "He told me I had to protect his legacy, had to keep the secrets safe." The plane's descent into Andrews Air Force Base was anything but routine. Red and blue emergency lights painted the tarmac like a patriotic disco, their rotating beams cutting through the early evening darkness. Fire trucks, ambulances, and police vehicles formed a tight perimeter around the designated landing area. Behind them, a growing crowd of journalists thrust cameras skyward, their lenses tracking the aircraft's approach like hungry predators. The landing gear touched down with a screech of rubber on concrete. The plane's wheels kicked up small clouds of smoke as the pilots brought the massive machine to a controlled stop. Through the windows, passengers could see dozens of veteran groups holding signs and American flags, having gathered after Monica's viral broadcast of the confrontation. Inside the cabin, Emma worked quickly to bandage Hawk's wound while keeping a watchful eye on the now subdued Slade. The bullet graze wasn't deep, but it had bled enough to soak through Hawk's dress shirt, leaving a stark reminder of how close the confrontation had come to tragedy. "Hold still, sir," Emma said, pressing a fresh gauze pad against his side. "The paramedics will want to check this properly." Hawk grimaced, but remained steady. "Been through worse, daughter." "Much worse." The cabin crackled with tension as federal agents boarded first, their movements precise and professional. They quickly took custody of Slade, Keene, and the other compromised agents. The sight of them being led away in handcuffs drew scattered applause from the passengers, many of whom were still processing the shocking events they'd witnessed. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom, steady despite the circumstances, "please remain seated until federal authorities complete their initial sweep. Emergency medical personnel will be boarding shortly to assist anyone requiring attention." Through the windows, passengers could see Monica Hawkins sprinting across the tarmac, her FBI credentials getting her past multiple security checkpoints. She carried herself with the same determined grace as her father, though her face showed the strain of the past few hours. The young black girl who had recorded the initial confrontation was still filming. "Mr. Hawk," she called out, "you want to say something for the record?" Hawk turned toward her, his eyes softening slightly. "Keep recording, child. The truth needs witnesses." Emma helped Hawk stand as federal agents began their systematic evacuation of the plane. The other passengers were escorted off first, many pausing to shake Hawk's hand or offer words of support. The young mother, whose child Emma had protected, stopped briefly. "Thank you both," she said, voice thick with emotion. "My father was in Panama too. He never talked about it. Now I understand why." When Monica finally made it onto the plane, she rushed straight to her father, carefully embracing him while mindful of his injury. "Dad," she whispered, her usual technical confidence cracking slightly. "I thought I was going to lose you." "Not today," Hawk replied, his large hand patting her back. "Not while there's still truth to tell." Emma gathered Hawk's belongings, his blood-stained cane, his briefcase, and the encrypted drive that had started it all. Together, she and Monica supported Hawk as they made their way toward the exit. His steps were slower now, the adrenaline wearing off, but his back remained straight, his head high. At the plane's door, they paused. The scene below was overwhelming. Hundreds of phones and cameras pointed their way, veterans standing at attention, reporters shouting questions. The setting sun cast long shadows across the tarmac, creating a dramatic backdrop for what was about to become a historic moment. "You ready for this?" Monica asked, squeezing her father's arm. Hawk took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the pain in his side. "Been ready for 30 years. They descended the stairs slowly, Emma and Monica matching Hawk's measured pace. Each step seemed to carry the weight of decades of silence, of buried truths finally rising to the surface. The cameras clicked and whirred, capturing every moment of their descent. Veterans in the crowd began saluting, a gesture of respect that spread through their ranks like a wave. Some wore Panama campaign ribbons, others held signs reading, "Justice for our brothers" and "No more cover-ups." As they reached the bottom of the stairs, reporters surged forward, held back only by a line of airport security. Their questions overlapped in a cacophony of demands. "Mr. Hawkins, what evidence was on the drive? Sir, can you confirm the involvement of Colonel Slade? What happened on that flight? Why come forward now?" Hawk paused, leaning more heavily on Emma and Monica. His wound throbbed, his body ached, but his voice, when it came, carried across the tarmac with unmistakable authority. The crowd fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment. "They tried to bury me," he said, each word clear and deliberate. "But I brought the shovel." The simple statement hit like a thunderclap. Cameras flashed in a strobe-like frenzy, capturing the image of the wounded warrior standing tall between the two women who had helped him survive. Emma, in her flight attendant uniform, Monica with her FBI badge glinting in the evening light. The veterans in the crowd began chanting Hawk's name, their voices rising in a powerful chorus that echoed across the tarmac. Some were crying, others stood at rigid attention, all understood the significance of what they were witnessing. Emergency medical personnel finally broke through the crowd with a wheelchair, but Hawk waved them off. "I'll walk," he insisted. "They need to see me walk." Monica and Emma exchanged glances over his head, recognizing the importance of this moment. This wasn't just about one man's vindication. It was about every soldier who had ever been silenced, every truth that had ever been buried, every injustice that had gone unchallenged. They moved forward slowly through the parting crowd, Hawk's blood-stained shirt and bandaged side visible to all, a testament to the price of truth, the cost of justice. But his head remained high, his gaze steady, carrying himself with the dignity that no amount of oppression had ever managed to strip away. In the days following the dramatic landing at Reagan National Airport, the story of Walter "Hawk" Hawkins exploded across media channels. The morning shows competed for exclusive coverage, but it was CNN's primetime special that landed the first joint interview with Emma Brooks and Monica Hawkins. What we witnessed on that flight wasn't just about a stolen seat, Emma explained. Her flight attendant uniform replaced by a sharp blazer. She sat straight-backed in the studio chair, her military bearing evident. It was about decades of systematic erasure coming to a head. Monica nodded, her cybersecurity expertise lending weight to her words. The airline's manifest was altered using military-grade encryption. This wasn't just discrimination. It was a coordinated attempt to isolate and eliminate a witness to war crimes. The host leaned forward. And Richard Slade? What can you tell us about his involvement? Slade's father was Colonel James Slade, Monica revealed, her voice tight with controlled anger. The same officer who ordered the massacre in Panama that my father witnessed. Richard was sent to ensure that evidence never made it to Washington. Footage played on screens behind them, Slade and Keene being led away in handcuffs, their faces twisted with defeat. FBI agents carried boxes of evidence from private security firm offices. The airline's corporate headquarters swarmed with federal investigators. The Department of Justice has opened a full investigation, the news anchor reported. Sources say the airline faces severe penalties for allowing their systems to be compromised and participating in what amounts to a criminal conspiracy. Emma's phone buzzed constantly with messages from other flight attendants, sharing similar stories of discrimination they'd witnessed but felt powerless to stop. This isn't just about one flight, she testified. This is about changing the whole system. Social media platforms exploded with activity. Stolen seat became the top trending topic worldwide, followed closely by Satya Veteran Justice. The young girl's original video of Hawk being forced from his seat had been viewed over 50 million times. People began sharing their own stories of discrimination, of moments when they'd been asked to move, to wait, to accept less than what was rightfully theirs. Veterans groups organized sit-ins at airports across the country, demanding better treatment for service members, especially those of color. Hawk's image appeared on magazine covers, his dignified profile and silver hair becoming a symbol of resistance against institutional racism. The Washington Post ran a feature titled, "The Man Who Wouldn't Move: How One Veteran's Stand Exposed Decades of Corruption." But Hawk himself avoided the spotlight. While Monica handled the press and Emma worked with veterans advocacy groups, he focused on a more personal mission. With his wound healing and his testimony secured by federal prosecutors, he began a quiet journey to visit the families of those who died in Panama. In Miami, he sat with Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband had been one of the first to notice something wrong with the operation. Carlos tried to report it, she said, serving Hawk coffee in her small kitchen. They transferred him to a forward position the next day, said it was a promotion. In San Antonio, he met with the Williams family. Their son had been the unit's communications officer, the one who first intercepted the illegal orders. His mother still kept his uniforms pressed and hanging in his childhood bedroom. Each visit brought new pieces of the puzzle together. Each family shared documents, photos, letters that had seemed suspicious at the time, but now formed a clear pattern of deliberate silencing. In Seattle, the rain fell steadily as Hawk knocked on the door of a modest house. Sarah Chen answered, her eyes widening with recognition. Her father had been Hawk's closest friend in the unit, the one who helped him begin documenting the evidence. "I remember you," she said softly, "from the funeral. You stood at attention the entire time, even after everyone else left." Hawk nodded, his throat tight. "Your father was a better man than most. He knew what was right." Sarah stepped back, inviting him in. The walls of her home were covered with photos, her father in uniform, with his unit, with his family. In one corner, a shadow box displayed his medals and a folded flag. "Dad used to say there was more to the story," she said, leading Hawk to the living room. "But he never told us what. Said it was safer if we didn't know." Hawk sat heavily in an offered chair, his cane across his knees. "Your father helped save the evidence. Without him, none of this would have come out." Sarah studied him for a long moment, seeing the weight he carried, understanding finally why her father had trusted this man so completely. Without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Hawk stiffened for a moment, then slowly relaxed into the embrace. No words were spoken. None were needed. In that silent hug was 30 years of guilt, of grief, of justice, too long delayed but finally arriving. Through the window, the Seattle rain continued to fall, washing the world clean. On the coffee table, Sarah's phone buzzed with another news alert about the investigation, about Slade's confession, about the changing tide of public opinion. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was this connection, this recognition between two people who had lost something precious, and were finally finding a way to honor that loss with truth. The embrace lasted until Sarah finally stepped back, wiping her eyes. On her father's wall, the photos seemed to watch them with approval, the past and present meeting in a moment of healing that no government agency could ever classify or contain. Inside the Capitol hearing room, every seat was filled. The air felt charged with anticipation as Walter "Hawk" Hawkins sat before the Senate Subcommittee on Military Oversight, his silver hair catching the harsh fluorescent lights. His bandaged side was hidden beneath his pressed navy suit, but the way he held himself, straight-backed and resolute, showed no sign of weakness. C-SPAN cameras tracked his every movement. Reporters crowded the edges of the room, notebooks and phones ready. Behind him, rows of spectators leaned forward in their seats, many wearing veterans' caps and service pins. "Mr. Hawkins," Senator Claire Martinez began, her voice carrying through the microphone, "we understand you've declined any special accommodations for your testimony today." "That's correct, Senator." Hawk's voice was steady, measured like ammunition being counted. "I've waited 30 years to speak these words. I don't need comfort to tell the truth." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Several committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Please proceed with your testimony," Martinez said, gesturing to the screens positioned around the room. Hawk opened a leather portfolio, his movements deliberate. "What you're about to see has been verified by multiple intelligence agencies. These are not allegations. These are facts." The first images appeared on the screens. Satellite photos of a Panamanian village, date stamped 1991. Operation Silent Spring was presented as a counter-narcotics mission, Hawk explained. The reality was far darker. He clicked through a series of documents, classified orders bearing Colonel James Slade's signature, communications logs, medical reports. Each piece built upon the last, creating an undeniable pattern of systematic violence against civilian populations. Colonel Slade didn't just order these operations, Hawk continued, his voice growing heavier. He created a template for hiding them. A template that would be used again in Iraq, in Somalia, in places we still don't have names for. The gallery grew still as photos appeared, mass graves, burned homes, lists of victims. Hawk named each person, each date, each commanding officer who had signed off on the atrocities. Several of those names belonged to men still wearing stars on their shoulders. "General Phillips," Hawk said, addressing one of the military observers directly. "You were Captain Phillips then. Your signature is on the 3rd page of that falsified after-action report. Would you like to explain why?" Phillips's face went pale. He started to stand, but his lawyer grabbed his arm. Hawk continued methodically through the evidence, his testimony like a surgeon's knife, precise, unflinching, cutting straight to the bone of truth. When he reached the encrypted files Monica had recovered from Colonel Slade's personal archives, several committee members visibly recoiled. "These are the original orders," Hawk explained, complete with marginalia showing exactly how the cover-up was constructed. Note the language used to justify targeting specific communities. Note the methods suggested for containing potential witnesses. Then came the footage from the flight. The screens filled with Agent Keen's face, captured by multiple phone cameras as he confronted Hawk in the airplane aisle. "Just take the water," Keen's voice rang out. "One sip, and it looks like natural causes. Clean. Easy. Like Panama." The room erupted in gasps. Hawk let the footage play, showing Keen's full confession, his admission of the plan to eliminate a problematic witness before landing. "Agent Keen and his accomplice are currently in military custody," Hawk stated, along with Richard Slade, who was carrying out his father's final order: silence anyone who knew the truth, by any means necessary. More evidence followed. Monica's technical analysis of the altered flight manifests, Emma's testimony about the coordinated attempt to isolate Hawk, documentation proving the airline's systems had been compromised by military intelligence. "This wasn't just about one flight," Hawk said, his voice growing stronger. "This wasn't just about one seat. This was about 30 years of systematic erasure, of veterans being silenced, of truth being buried under layers of classification and convenience." He looked up at the committee, his eyes hard as granite. "You want to know why I kept this evidence in my cane? Because they taught us in the service. Keep your weapon close. And the truth? That's the deadliest weapon of all." The silence in the room was absolute. Senators who had started the hearing looking bored or skeptical now sat rigid in their chairs, faces ashen. The evidence was irrefutable, the implications staggering. Then, from the back of the room came a sound, the scrape of a chair, footsteps. A black veteran in his 70s, wearing a Vietnam service cap, rose slowly to his feet. His arm moved in a crisp salute, held steady despite his age. Like a wave, others began to stand. First the veterans: Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Then civilians, activists, family members of the fallen. The applause started softly, then built to a thunderous roar. At the committee table, Senator Martinez wiped tears from her eyes. "We let this happen," she whispered into her microphone, the words carrying through the speakers. "All these years, we let this happen." Hawk lowered his head, his shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time since he'd entered the room. The truth he'd carried for so long, the weight that had bent but never broken him, was finally set free. In a secure conference room deep within the Capitol building, Hawk sat between Monica and Emma, his cane propped against the polished mahogany table. 3 flat-screen TVs mounted on the wall played different news channels, their closed captions scrolling in sync with the urgent voices of reporters. "Breaking news from Washington," a CNN anchor announced, her expression grave. In a stunning development following veteran Walter Hawkins' congressional testimony, federal authorities have formally charged Agent Peter Keen and Operative James Martinez with multiple felonies, including attempted murder and conspiracy. The screen split to show Keen being led into a federal courthouse, his wrists and ankles shackled. His face, once coldly confident, now looked hollow and aged. "Both suspects are being held without bail," the reporter continued. "Sources say the evidence against them is, quote, overwhelming and irrefutable." Monica reached over and squeezed her father's hand. Hawk's fingers were warm and steady against hers, showing none of the tremors that had plagued him during the years of carrying this burden alone. "Look at this," Emma said, pointing to MSNBC's coverage. The headline banner read, "Panama Massacre: Decades of Deception Exposed." The footage showed General Phillips being escorted from his home by FBI agents, his military decorations conspicuously absent from his civilian clothes. His wife stood in the doorway, crying into her hands as cameras flashed. Four-star general among 12 senior military officials indicted, the reporter explained. Sources say more arrests are expected as investigators dig deeper into the evidence contained in Hawkins's encrypted files. Hawk watched the screens with an expression that mixed vindication with old pain. "Those men gave the orders," he said quietly. "But they never had to see the bodies. Never had to write the letters home." The Fox News coverage shifted to Richard Slade's sentencing hearing. The businessman's son stood before the judge, his designer suit replaced by prison orange. In exchange for his cooperation with federal prosecutors, the reporter stated, Richard Slade received a 15-year sentence. His testimony has already led to the arrest of 3 additional military contractors and the emergency shutdown of Black River Security Solutions, a private military contractor linked to operations in Panama, Iraq, and classified locations worldwide. Emma shook her head. 15 years seems light. He gave them what they needed, Monica replied, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard as she tracked the online reaction. The evidence he turned over about his father's network, it's bringing down the whole system. The screens showed protesters gathering outside the Pentagon, many carrying signs with Hawk's photo and slogans like "Justice for our veterans" and "No more silence." Veterans in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder with activists, their diverse faces united in purpose. Congress is fast-tracking the Veterans Justice Reform Act, a political analyst explained. The bill would create new protections for service members who report misconduct, establish an independent oversight committee, and provide resources for veterans facing institutional discrimination. They're calling it the Hawkins Act, Emma noted, smiling at the older man. You're going to be in history books. Hawk's expression remained stoic. History books didn't help those boys in Panama. Didn't help their families. This isn't about my name. On screen, the Secretary of Defense announced his resignation, citing failures of leadership in allowing the cover-up to persist. The Joint Chiefs of Staff issued a formal apology to the families of soldiers lost in unauthorized operations. Monica's laptop pinged with new alerts. Social media is exploding, she reported. The hashtags are trending worldwide. People are sharing their own stories of military injustice. It's like a dam breaking. The news showed crowds gathering at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, laying flowers and American flags. A group of elderly veterans in wheelchairs held up a banner reading, "Thank you, Hawk." Your testimony views just passed 10 million, Emma said, checking her phone. The airline's stock is tanking. They've fired the entire board of directors and announced a complete policy overhaul. Hawk watched as more footage played. Agent Keene's lawyer reading a statement admitting to decades of systematic suppression of whistleblowers. Richard Slade detailing the network of private contractors used to silence dissent. General Phillips breaking down on the stand as he described his role in the cover-up. Look at them now, Hawk murmured. All that power, all that arrogance, turns to dust when the truth hits daylight. The screens showed the Panama village where it had all started. Local residents were being interviewed, finally free to tell their stories. An elderly woman held up a faded photo of her son, missing since 1991. The State Department has announced a formal investigation, the reporter said. Representatives will travel to Panama next week to begin the process of identifying victims and providing long-delayed compensation to their families. Monica's fingers paused over her keyboard. She looked at the screens, then at her father's face. Seeing both the weight of what he'd carried and the strength that had never wavered. She closed her laptop with a decisive click. The sound seemed to mark the end of something, not just the news cycle, but decades of silence and shadow. "It's done," she said simply. Hawk nodded once, his movement steady and calm. His voice, when it came, held neither triumph nor bitterness. Just the quiet certainty of a man who had finally completed his mission. Took him long enough. 2 weeks after the hearings, Hawk stood in the same Atlanta airport, his new titanium cane gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The morning crowd parted around him differently now, not with the dismissive shuffle of before, but with quiet recognition and respect. He wore his dress blues today, medals catching the light. Not for show, but because Monica had insisted. "Let them see you, Dad. All of you." The TSA checkpoint loomed ahead. Hawk's shoulders tensed from old habit, but the lead agent straightened when she saw him approach. "Sir," she said, stepping forward, "we have a priority lane ready for you." Other agents nodded as he passed through security without a single random check. His cane, a gift from a veterans group, moved through the scanner without question. At the gate, the difference was even more striking. The waiting area fell quiet as he approached. A young soldier in fatigues shot to his feet, offering a crisp salute. "Staff Sergeant Miller, sir. It's an honor." Hawk returned the salute. "At ease, son." An elderly white woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "My husband was in Panama," she said softly. "He never told us what happened there. Now we know why." The gate agent, a different one from before, called for pre-boarding. "We'd like to welcome our active duty military and veterans, beginning with Congressional Medal of Honor recipient Walter Hawkins." A scattered applause broke out. Hawk nodded once, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its importance. This wasn't about him. It was about making visible what had been hidden for too long. As he approached the jet bridge, the pilot emerged from the cockpit. Captain Sarah Chen, according to her nameplate, stood ramrod straight and saluted. "Mr. Hawkins, it's a privilege to have you aboard. I've arranged for an honor guard to meet us in D.C. "Not necessary, Captain." "With respect, sir, it is. My father served in Panama. He didn't make it home." Their eyes met in silent understanding. Hawk touched her shoulder briefly as he passed. The first-class cabin welcomed him with the same hushed reverence. A flight attendant, male, middle-aged, black, helped stow his carry-on. "Seat 2B, sir, the same one as before." Hawk settled into the leather seat, his body remembering the confrontation from weeks ago. But today, the ghosts felt lighter. Not gone, but transformed into fuel for change, rather than chains of regret. A young black boy, maybe 7 or 8, sat in 2A beside him. He wore a Junior Aviation Club t-shirt and couldn't stop staring. "My mom showed me your video," the boy finally blurted. "The one from the plane." She cried. Hawk turned to face him fully. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus. Marcus Washington." The boy fidgeted with his seatbelt. "Is it true you fought in wars?" "Several. And you caught bad guys on this same plane?" A hint of a smile touched Hawk's weathered face. "Something like that." Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to an awed whisper. "Were you really a hero?" The question hung in the air as the engines rumbled to life. Through the window, Hawk could see ground crew members pausing their work to salute the aircraft. On the terminal roof, an American flag snapped in the Georgia wind. He thought about heroes, about the men he'd served with, the ones who never came home, the families who waited decades for answers. He thought about Emma Brooks, who'd risked her job to help expose the truth, about Monica, who'd never stopped believing in justice even when he'd nearly lost hope. "No, Marcus," Hawk said finally, adjusting his cane as the plane began to taxi. "Not a hero, just a man who wouldn't stay seated." The boy considered this with surprising gravity. My grandpa says sometimes not staying seated is the bravest thing you can do. Your grandpa sounds like a wise man. He marched with Dr. King, Marcus said proudly. Got arrested and everything. The plane accelerated down the runway. Hawk felt the familiar surge of takeoff, but this time without the weight of secrets or the shadow of threats. Just the clean momentum of forward motion. Marcus pressed his face to the window as Atlanta fell away below them. Mom says things are different now because of you. That people have to listen when we tell the truth. They always had to listen, Hawk replied. We just had to make them hear. The seatbelt sign dinged off. A flight attendant appeared with fresh coffee and a newspaper. The headline read, Senate passes Hawkins Act. New era for military accountability. Mr. Hawkins, the attendant said warmly. Can I get you anything else? He shook his head, watching Marcus sketch airplane designs on his kid's menu. The boy's innocent focus reminded him of another child from long ago, a Panamanian boy who'd waved to their helicopter just hours before the massacre. That memory would never fade, but now it drove him forward instead of holding him back. The plane leveled at cruising altitude, DC still hours away. But this time, Hawk knew exactly where he was headed. Not just to another hearing or ceremony, but toward something larger. A future where truth didn't have to fight so hard to be heard. Marcus looked up from his drawing. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. Be braver, Hawk said. Be yourself. The boy nodded solemnly, then returned to his artwork. Outside the window, America unfolded beneath them, its patchwork of fields and cities bathed in morning light. Hawk settled deeper into seat 2B, feeling its contours support him properly this time. The seat he'd earned, the seat he'd fought for, the seat that now carried him forward into clearer skies. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.